The purpose of this presentation is to discuss the question, is Macbeth a tragedy? To help us answer that, we're going to look at Aristotle's qualifications for tragedy. Aristotle was a Greek philosopher who in 335 BCE wrote a book called Poetics. A lot of the Greek stuff that people did we don't really hold to anymore. We've disproven a lot of their scientific discoveries and well advanced our ideas past where they took us, but some of the stuff that Aristotle did in Poetics, outlining various genres and their characteristics, are still important for our criticism of literary works, both past and present. So the first idea that Aristotle put forward was that a work of tragedy must be serious. And in this, he was looking for a unity of tone. The idea is that from beginning until end, it needs to be a serious piece of literature. No comedic breaks, no distractions from the sobriety of the story. Aristotle was big on unities, and he talked about a couple unities that we don't really use anymore in our modern storytelling. The first is a unity of action, which he thought of as a play or story only having a single storyline. So you can think about any episode of any sitcom that you watch usually has 3 or 4 storylines. You have the overarching storyline that a lot of characters are involved in, and then you have side stories that only 1 or maybe 2 characters are involved in. So we've moved away from that. The second unity he put forward was a unity of time. Literally, he wanted all plays to take place within the space of 24 hours, which of course we don't do anymore. And then the last one was a unity of place. Again, literally that they all took place within the exact same setting. No scene changes, no backdrops, nothing. Some of this has to do with the fact that the technology for the Greek stage was not super advanced, but all of these things were to create this very pressurized play, one that took place with great immediacy and great urgency. We've stretched some of that, but as we think about Macbeth, we could say certainly there's no unity of place. We open in the forest, we move to a military camp, we are in England at times, in Scotland at other times. We're also failing in the unity of time. It takes place well past the constraints of a single day. But unity of action certainly takes place in the play. There aren't really any side quests or any storylines that are secondary to the main storyline. Everything that happens in the play is with the intent of crowning Macbeth king. But back to the idea of tragedy. The first qualification for Aristotle is this seriousness, this unity of tone that's characteristic of the work throughout. The second idea for Aristotle was that the tragedy needed to be of a certain magnitude. We use the word magnitude to discuss earthquakes. We talk about their size, their impactfulness, the power of something. So this looked like 2 different things for Aristotle. The first is we wanted a magnitude of character, meaning somebody who was noble, someone of high standing. Secondly, we wanted a magnitude of tragedy. The events themselves needed to have impact and size and weight to them. Your dog eating your homework is inconvenient and maybe sad, but it is not tragic. Stepping into a puddle and ruining a new pair of shoes is inconvenient, but it's not tragic. The idea of tragedy here is that it needs to be something heavy, something very impactful and serious. So 2 things to connect to that. The first is this Greek word peripeteia. Peripeteia can be described as the reversal of the situation. This is when a character who has been on the up and up, a character who has been in a high standing, is brought low. The second part of this is anagnoriasis, which is the moment of discovery when the character realizes the truth. A great example of this in literature is Oedipus Rex, which maybe some of you have read, and you can look up the summary of the story. But there's a moment in Oedipus Rex when Oedipus realizes that he is the cause of all the problems in the play. And that creates this peripeteia, this reversal of the situation, as well as this crucial moment of discovery, anagnoriasis. And it's almost as if the playwright shows us this character's eyes, and we see it. We see the moment when he realizes all the stuff that he thought was good is bad. All the things he thought about himself are wrong. And Aristotle says that's tragedy, when you can see it in the character's eyes and they know that they did something wrong. That's the moment of tragedy. The third qualification then is that the story needs to be complete. with a distinct beginning, middle, and end, and no loose ends. A narrative technique for this is the idea of anything that's introduced in the beginning of the story needs to be answered by the end of the story. And Chekhov's gun, the idea that if there is a loaded gun in the beginning of the book, something needs to happen with that gun soon. So the question is, are there any details in Macbeth that are not answered or not addressed, any lingering questions, or is it a complete play in which Shakespeare addresses all those concerns? So the preceding three, serious, of a certain magnitude, complete, those are all objective qualifications for tragedy. This last one, catharsis, is subjective. Catharsis is the purging of emotional tensions. We think about things that are cathartic. It's almost a form of therapy. It's something that's therapeutic, or that is the relaxation of tensions that have been building up. So you can think about this in terms of entertainment. If you've ever watched a movie, maybe it wasn't all that funny, but you just laughed and laughed and laughed, and you laughed until you cried. And at the end, there's this moment of just kind of like this relief, this like deep sigh that says, I needed to laugh that hard, and now I feel purged, I feel clean as a result. Maybe you've had that experience with crying. You've watched a movie, and it wasn't really that sad, but you just wept, and you cried and cried and cried, and you had yourself a nice indulgent cry, and at the end, this nice kind of sense of relaxation. You've maybe experienced this physically, gone to the gym, worked out really hard, taken a hot shower, your muscles feel loose, there's this sense of all that tension that's built up, all that stress is kind of like leaving your body. And so the catharsis here is an emotional catharsis, and in tragedy, that catharsis is of two particular emotions, pity and fear. The idea here is that the play would create these emotions in you to help you get rid of them. It's almost like going to see a movie that's sad and you know it's going to be sad, and you walk out of the theater into the light of day or into the cool evening and you say, well, I've gotten all of that sad stuff out of the way, now I want to go do something fun. And there's a sense of, I don't need to experience these emotions for a little while because I just kind of purged them from myself. So here's what these look like. Pity, we think of this word negatively, and I think Aristotle probably is referring more to genuine empathy than he is with pity. We say, I don't want your pity, don't you dare pity me. We don't want to be pitied because it's associated with shame or embarrassment. Empathy, though, is a sense of being able to walk in a character's shoes. And for the tragedy, the idea here is that we empathize with the character in recognizing that the character doesn't deserve the punishment that he gets, that the punishment doesn't fit the crime. The idea is they're punished too much. They're treated too unfairly. They maybe did something wrong, but they don't deserve the treatment that's given to them at the end. The second part of this is fear of the tragedy itself, but also fear that in some way this could happen to you also. So what does that mean? Does it mean that you are watching Macbeth and then afraid that you would want to kill the president to become the president? No, but maybe you could say, I fear the possibility of starting down a path that takes me into things that I know I don't want to do. Or I fear that I could be led into something that I think is really good, only to find that it's leading me into worse and worse things. Or I fear that playing around with things that right now seem like they're good could lead to some sort of addiction or some sort of trap where, like Macbeth, I am stepped in blood so far that I can't get out of it and I can't turn away from it. So pity and fear, we need to empathize with the character. We need to feel that this in some way is relatable to us in order for it to be a tragedy.